Captain Jack Mitchell had been staring at empty screens for 40 years. The Deep Space Monitoring Station sat quietly in orbit around Earth, watching for something that everyone hoped would never come. Most nights, Jack would drink his coffee and watch the stars, wondering if humanity was truly alone in the universe. Tonight was different. The coffee cup slipped from Jack's hands as dozens of massive shapes appeared on his radar. They materialized out of nowhere, like ghosts becoming solid. Each one was the size of a city, dark and menacing against the backdrop of space. Jack's heart pounded as he counted them. 20, 30, 50 massive ships hanging at the edge of the solar system. "Linda, wake up Director Harrison," Jack called his partner, his voice barely steady. Linda Thompson had been working the night shift with Jack for 15 years. She'd never heard that tone in his voice before. The alien ships just sat there, silent and waiting. Jack's instruments showed energy readings beyond anything Earth had ever produced. These weren't explorers or traders. The formation, the positioning, the sheer size of the fleet screamed one thing: invasion. Then the message came. It started as static, then cleared into perfect English. The voice was cold, mechanical, without emotion. "Inhabitants of the third planet, you have been selected for integration into the Zephyrian Empire. You have 72 hours to surrender all military forces and prepare for colonization protocols. Resistance will result in complete planetary sterilization." Jack sat in stunned silence. 40 years of waiting, and this was how first contact happened. Not with wonder or scientific exchange, but with an ultimatum. These aliens, these Zephyrians, saw humanity as nothing more than insects to be swept aside. The transmission continued with clinical precision. "Your species demonstrates primitive technology levels, chemical propulsion systems, basic orbital capabilities, fragmented political structures. Integration will proceed according to standard protocols. Compliance ensures survival of breeding populations." Breeding populations. They were talking about humans like livestock. Jack looked at the red button on his console. For decades, it had been there, waiting. The emergency broadcast system that would alert every military installation, every government, every person on Earth that the day they'd always feared had finally arrived. His finger hovered over the button. Once he pressed it, everything would change. Humanity would know they weren't alone, and that their new neighbors wanted them dead or enslaved. But first, Jack Mitchell, a maintenance worker from Ohio who'd spent his life watching empty space, decided to send his own message back. He keyed the transmitter and spoke into the microphone with the steady voice of someone who'd seen enough of life to know what mattered. "This is Earth. We got your message. Here's ours. Come and take it." The words echoed across space, carrying with them the defiance of an entire species. It wasn't a government response or a military communique. It was the voice of one human being who refused to kneel. Within minutes, Jack's message was racing across Earth's communication networks. Military bases went to high alert. Emergency meetings convened in Washington, London, Moscow, and Beijing. Scientists analyzed the alien ships while generals planned offensive strategies. But in homes across the world, ordinary people heard Jack's words and understood something important. These aliens expected humanity to surrender without a fight. They'd studied human technology and dismissed it as primitive. They thought humans would panic or submit like frightened animals. They were about to learn their first lesson about humanity. Assumptions could be deadly. The Zephyrians had conquered 43 worlds using the same playbook, arrived with overwhelming force, broadcast surrender terms, and watched the primitive species either flee in terror or submit to superior technology. It had worked perfectly every time. Fleet Commander Vex Kala reviewed Earth's technological assessment with satisfaction. Chemical rockets, nuclear weapons, basic electronics. The humans had barely achieved spaceflight. Their planet was divided into competing nations that spent more time fighting each other than advancing their technology. It should have been simple. Drop into the system, demonstrate superiority, accept surrender, begin colonization. The human response puzzled him. 3 words: come and take it. No species had ever responded to Zephyrian ultimatums with defiance. Fear, yes. Desperate pleas for mercy, certainly. But never challenge. Commander Vexkala authorized the first phase of colonization. Landing forces would secure major population centers, while the orbital fleet prepared bombardment positions. Standard procedure for primitive species, showing initial resistance. As the first alien dropships began their descent toward Earth, humanity was already moving. 40 years of science fiction movies, military planning, and human paranoia were about to pay dividends that no alien empire could have anticipated. The Zephyrians expected conquest. Earth was preparing to give them a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The first alien dropships came down like falling stars over the mountains of Afghanistan. Colonel Beth Anderson crouched behind a rocky outcrop, watching through her binoculars as the massive craft settled into the valley below. 20 years of fighting in these same mountains had taught her one crucial lesson. Every enemy bleeds, and every enemy makes mistakes. The Zephyrians emerged from their ships with the confidence of conquerors. They moved in perfect formation, their advanced armor gleaming in the morning sun. Their weapons hummed with energy that could probably level a building. They looked unstoppable. They were about to learn why humans had survived as a species. "Tommy, you seeing this?" Beth whispered into her radio to Sergeant Tom Rodriguez, positioned a mile away with his squad. "Roger that, Colonel. Ugly bastards, aren't they?" Tommy's voice crackled back with dark humor that only soldiers understood. The aliens spread out across the valley floor, their scanners sweeping for human life signs. They'd chosen this location because their orbital surveillance showed it was empty, barren, worthless. What their scanners couldn't detect were the tons of mining explosives buried beneath the valley floor, connected to detonation systems that didn't rely on electronics, old-fashioned chemical timers and pressure plates. Technology so primitive that advanced alien scanners dismissed it as geological formations. "Wait for it," Beth whispered as the aliens reached the center of the kill zone. The explosion shook the mountains. Centuries-old mining techniques, perfected by humans who'd spent generations blasting through solid rock, turned the valley into a crater. The alien formation simply vanished in a cloud of dust and debris. 3,000 miles away, Lieutenant David Price watched through his submarine's periscope as alien landing craft approached the Arctic ice shelf. The HMS Triumph had been conducting routine patrols when the invasion began. Now, David found himself in the most important battle of his career. The aliens had chosen the ice shelf because it appeared stable and uninhabited, perfect for establishing a forward base. What they didn't know was that David's crew had spent the last 2 days placing carefully calculated charges at strategic stress points beneath the ice. "Fire control, this is the captain." David spoke calmly into his comm. "Execute Operation Avalanche." The controlled detonation sent shock waves through the ice shelf. Physics did the rest. 1 billion tons of ice collapsed into the sea, creating a tsunami that crushed the alien landing craft like toys in a bathtub. Back at the Zephyrian command ship, Fleet Commander Vexkala stared at his tactical display in confusion. 2 entire landing forces had gone silent within minutes of touchdown. This wasn't supposed to happen. Primitive species didn't fight back effectively. They certainly didn't use their own planet as a weapon. "Deploy additional forces," Vexkala ordered. Increase scanning intensity. But human forces were already adapting. In the jungles of South America, Captain Lisa Hayes led her special operations team through terrain that swallowed conquistadors and Nazi treasure hunters alike. The aliens might have superior technology, but they'd never fought in a rainforest where every tree could hide an enemy and every stream could conceal an ambush. Her team had spent 3 days preparing surprises. Punji stakes made from alien metal salvage from crash sites, positioned where alien patrols would naturally take cover. Trip wires connected to grenades hidden in the canopy above. Even the local wildlife had been weaponized, with motion sensors placed near wasp nests and snake dens. When the next wave of alien troops landed, they found themselves fighting not just humans, but an entire ecosystem that had been turned against them. In urban areas, the resistance took different forms. Police Chief Robert Kane in Detroit had 30 years of experience dealing with armed groups who thought they owned the streets. These aliens were just another gang, albeit one with better equipment. Kane's officers had spent decades learning every alley, every rooftop, every underground tunnel in their city. They knew which buildings had structural weaknesses, where the power lines ran, which intersections became death traps when you controlled the traffic lights. The aliens expected to fight an army. Instead, they faced an entire population that refused to submit. The Zephyrians had protocols for planetary conquest, refined over dozens of successful invasions. But those protocols assumed logical behavior from inferior species. They assumed surrender when faced with superior firepower. They assumed panic when confronted with advanced technology. What they got instead was a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history fighting everything from saber-toothed tigers to each other. Humans didn't just adapt to warfare, they excelled at it. They found ways to turn disadvantages into strengths and weaknesses into weapons. By the end of the first day, Zephyrian casualties exceeded their projections for the entire campaign. Their own reports described human tactics as unprecedented and illogical. Humans were destroying their own infrastructure rather than let it be captured. They were using primitive weapons in ways that bypassed advanced offenses. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to enjoy the fight. Commander Vexcala realized he was facing something his empire had never encountered before, a species that was more dangerous when cornered than when left alone. Dr. Rebecca Clark hadn't slept in 3 days. Her underground laboratory buzzed with activity as teams of scientists worked around the clock, analyzing captured alien biological samples. What they discovered would change everything about this war. "General Hayes, you need to see this," Rebecca called out as a military commander entered her lab. Her hand shook slightly as she pointed to the microscope display. "Their immune systems are incredibly advanced, but they have a fatal flaw." General Robert Hayes leaned over the screen, studying the alien cell structure. 3 decades of military service hadn't prepared him for biological warfare on this scale, but he understood the implications immediately. "They've never encountered Earth pathogens," Rebecca continued, her voice gaining strength. "Their bodies can fight off weapons designed to kill them, but they're completely defenseless against the common cold virus we've modified." The plan that emerged was as brilliant as it was ruthless. If the Zephyrians wanted Earth's resources, they'd get them contaminated beyond use. Every water treatment plant, every agricultural center, every industrial facility that couldn't be defended would be poisoned with engineered pathogens designed to target alien biology. Across the city, Major Peter Campbell led his demolition team through the London financial district. His orders were crystal clear: leave nothing useful behind. The shaped charges were positioned with surgical precision, designed to bring down entire city blocks in controlled collapses. "Sir, this is the Bank of England," his demolitions expert, Sergeant Mike Turner, pointed out. "Centuries of history in there." Peter looked at the building that had survived the Blitz, 2 world wars, and countless economic crises. "Mike, if we don't stop them here, there won't be anyone left to care about history." The explosions echoed across London as humanity began implementing what military strategists would later call the Scorched Earth Protocol. If Earth couldn't remain free, it would become worthless to its conquerors. In Moscow, Colonel Anna Petrov coordinated the systematic destruction of Russia's industrial heartland. Oil refineries burned with black smoke that could be seen from orbit. Chemical plants were rigged to explode in sequence, creating toxic clouds that would render vast areas uninhabitable for decades. The aliens expected to inherit a functioning world, Anna explained to her officers as they watched the steel mill collapse into molten ruin. Instead, they'll get a wasteland that costs more to clean up than it's worth. The psychological impact on the Zephyrians was immediate and devastating. Their conquest model depended on capturing infrastructure intact. Every species they'd encountered had fought to preserve their civilization, even in defeat. Humans were systematically destroying everything they'd built rather than see it in alien hands. Commander Vexcala received reports that defied all logic. Humans were poisoning their own water supplies. They were burning their own cities. Food production centers were being rendered toxic by their own defenders. The planet that had appeared so valuable from orbit was becoming a contaminated wasteland. But the humans weren't finished. In laboratories hidden deep underground, teams of engineers worked on projects that pushed the boundaries of science fiction. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had spent her career studying weather manipulation for agricultural purposes. Now she was weaponizing hurricanes. "We can't control where they form," Jennifer explained to the assembled military leaders, "but we can influence their intensity and direction. The next time they try to establish a beachhead, we'll hit them with Category 5 storms." The atmospheric processors came online just as the next wave of Zephyrian landing craft approached the Gulf of Mexico. What should have been a routine deployment turned into a nightmare as artificial hurricanes tore their formations apart. Ships designed to survive the vacuum of space were ripped apart by winds that humans had learned to harness. In the Pacific, oceanographer Dr. David Kim had turned his knowledge of underwater currents into something far deadlier. Tsunami generators, hidden on the ocean floor, could create massive waves on command. Alien fleets approaching coastal targets found themselves facing walls of water that destroyed entire invasion forces. The Zephyrians had expected resistance, but this was something else entirely. This was a species that had turned their own planet into a weapon. Every natural system, every piece of infrastructure, every resource they had come to claim was being systematically destroyed or weaponized against them. What terrified the aliens most was the human attitude toward their own destruction. Intercepted communications showed no despair, no regret about the devastation. Instead, human voices carried a grim satisfaction. They were proud of their ability to deny their enemies the prize they'd come to claim. "They fight like they have nothing to lose," one Zephyrian field commander reported back to the fleet. "But it's worse than that. They fight like they want to lose everything rather than submit." The doctrine that emerged from human resistance will be studied by military strategists across the galaxy for generations. It wasn't about winning in the traditional sense. It was about making victory so costly that enemies will regret ever starting the fight. Earth was teaching the universe a hard lesson. Some prizes weren't worth claiming, and some species were too dangerous to conquer. Admiral Susan Parker stood in what looked like an ordinary research station on the far side of the moon. For 3 years, this facility had operated under the cover of geological surveys and mineral extraction. The truth was far more interesting and infinitely more dangerous. "Bring the defense grid online," Susan commanded, her voice echoing to the hidden command center carved deep into lunar rock. Around her, dozens of technicians worked at stations that control humanity's greatest secret. Captain William Foster watched from his position inside the asteroid series as massive panels slid away from what had appeared to be mining equipment. Underneath lay the business end of a railgun system that could accelerate tungsten rods to 17 kilometers per second. The mining operation had been real, but it had also been the perfect cover for building weapons platforms throughout the asteroid belt. "Target acquired," William reported, his crosshairs locked on the Zephyrian flagship. "Firing solution ready." The first salvo screamed across space at speeds that made bullets look sluggish. The Zephyrians had shields designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb explosive impacts. They had no defense against solid metal moving at relativistic speeds. Commander Vex Kala felt his flagship shudder as tungsten rods punched through his hull like paper. Emergency klaxons wailed as atmosphere vented into space. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Their intelligence clearly showed that humans had barely achieved interplanetary travel. The answer came as sleek human warships emerged from behind planetary shadows and asteroid fields. These weren't the crude chemical rockets that Zephyrian scouts had observed. These were predators built for war, with lines that spoke of advanced engineering and weapons that hummed with barely contained power. Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Walsh pulled her experimental fighter through a barrel roll that would have liquefied any human pilot from a previous generation. The inertial dampening technology had been reverse engineered from a Zephyrian scout ship that crashed in the Sahara 2 years earlier. The aliens had been watching humanity, but humanity had been watching back. "Control, this is Falcon Lead." Jennifer's voice crackled over the comm as she lined up her attack run on a Zephyrian destroyer. Beginning strafing run on target designation Alpha 7, her fighters' weapons weren't based on human technology at all. Particle beams reverse-engineered from captured alien equipment cut through enemy armor like a hot knife through butter. The aliens found themselves being killed by their own weapons technology, improved and perfected by human engineers. Back on Earth, Dr. Margaret Ross activated systems that had been built in absolute secrecy over the past 3 years. Hidden facilities near Mercury's orbit housed equipment that most humans would have considered impossible. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since the first alien probe was detected at the edge of the solar system. Solar flare protocols are active, Margaret announced to the Global Defense Network, initiating controlled coronal mass ejection in 3, 2, 1. The sun itself became humanity's weapon. Magnetic field manipulators, powered by fusion reactors that borrowed alien energy technology, triggered massive solar storms. Electromagnetic pulses raced across the solar system, frying Zephyrian electronics and leaving their ships dead in space. The revelation hit the alien fleet like a physical blow. Every piece of intelligence they gathered about human capabilities had been deliberately falsified. The primitive rockets were decoys. The limited space presence was camouflage. The divided political structure was theater designed to make Earth appear weak and unprepared. In reality, humanity had detected Zephyrian survey probes years earlier and had spent that time preparing for war. Not just any war, but conflict specifically tailored to destroy an enemy with superior technology and overwhelming numerical advantage. Captain Thomas Wright commanded the U.S. Defiance from a bridge that incorporated technology from a dozen different alien species. Humanity hadn't just reverse-engineered Zephyrian equipment. They'd been collecting crash probes, damaged fighters, and disabled scouts from multiple alien civilizations for decades. All stations, prepare for hyperspace jump, Thomas announced as his ship's exotic matter drive spun up to operational power. Target, Zephyrian home system. The drive technology came from a derelict alien vessel, found drifting in the outer system. The weapons were an improvement on Zephyrian particle beams. The shields incorporated force field technology from 3 different species. Humanity had built their first interstellar warship from the wreckage of their enemies' reconnaissance missions. As human ships began appearing throughout the solar system, Commander Vex Kalla realized the scope of the deception. This wasn't a primitive species making a desperate last stand. This was an apex predator that had been studying its enemies and preparing for the fight of its life. The asteroids weren't just mining operations. They were weapons platforms. The orbital stations weren't just research facilities. They were command centers. The moon itself had been hollowed out and turned into a fortress that could coordinate the defense of the entire system. Humanity had weaponized their solar system and turned it into a trap specifically designed to destroy anyone foolish enough to invade. The Zephyrians hadn't come to conquer a primitive world. They'd walked into the lair of something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Dr. Margaret Ross stood at the controls of humanity's most audacious weapon, hidden deep within Mercury's orbital research station. For 2 years, she worked alongside the galaxy's brightest minds to achieve something that most species considered impossible, turning a star into a weapon. Magnetic field generators at maximum output, Margaret announced into her headset, her fingers dancing across controls that could unleash the power of a god. Initiating stellar manipulation sequence. The sun responded to humanity's touch like a giant musical instrument. Carefully controlled magnetic fields, generated by stations positioned at key points around the solar system, began to influence the star's natural behavior. What followed was a symphony of destruction that would echo across the galaxy. Massive solar flares erupted from the sun's surface, each one carrying the electromagnetic force of 1,000 nuclear weapons. The directed energy waves raced across space at the speed of light, striking the Zephyrian fleet with precision that seemed impossible. Commander Vex Kalla watched in horror as his ships went dark around him. Electronics that had functioned flawlessly for centuries simply died as human-controlled solar storms washed over them. Emergency power failed. Life support systems flickered and went silent. Weapons that could level continents became useless metal sculptures drifting in space. How is this possible? Vex Kalla whispered as his flagship's bridge plunged into darkness. No species in the galaxy's recorded history had ever achieved stellar manipulation. The technology required was beyond the theoretical capabilities of even the most advanced civilizations. The answer came from Captain Thomas Wright, standing on the bridge of humanity's most advanced warship. The U.S. Defiance had been built from technologies salvaged from a dozen different alien species, each one contributing pieces to a puzzle that only human engineers had been crazy enough to assemble. All weapon systems online. Thomas announced his crew. Target the command vessels first. Let's send a message they'll never forget. The Defiance's main weapon was a gravity manipulation cannon that could tear apart matter at the molecular level. The technology came from a derelict alien vessel found drifting in deep space, but human physicists had improved it beyond its original specifications. Instead of creating small gravitational anomalies, they'd learned to generate microscopic black holes that lasted just long enough to destroy whatever they touched. Zephyrian warships that had survived battles against entire fleets simply disintegrated as their atomic bonds were torn apart by artificial gravity wells. The aliens' advanced armor, designed to withstand energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, offered no protection against weapons that attacked the fundamental forces holding matter together. Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Walsh led a squadron of human fighters to the dying enemy fleet, her pilots weaving between debris fields that had once been mighty alien dreadnoughts. Her fighters' AI, reverse-engineered from captured Zephyrian technology, painted targets faster than human reflexes could track them. Control, this is Falcon Squadron, Jennifer reported as her weapons found another target. Enemy formations are breaking up. They're trying to retreat. But retreat was no longer an option. Admiral Susan Parker had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, and she had no intention of letting a single enemy ship escape to warn others about Earth's capabilities. Activate the hyperspace interdiction field. Susan commanded from a lunar command center. Nothing leaves this system without our permission. The technology was humanity's crowning achievement, combining gravitational manipulation with exotic matter physics to create a bubble around the entire solar system. Any ship attempting to jump to hyperspace would find itself trapped, pulled back into normal space by forces that bent reality itself. Commander Vex Kalla realized with growing terror that his empire's greatest fleet was being systematically annihilated by a species they dismissed as primitive. Worse, the humans weren't just defending their world. They were demonstrating capabilities that threatened the balance of power in the entire galaxy. Broadcast surrender terms. Vex Kalla orders communications officer. Offer tribute, territorial concessions, anything they want. The response came from Admiral Parker herself, her voice carrying across space with the authority of a species that had just proven itself capable of stellar engineering. Commander Vex Kalla, your surrender is noted but not accepted. Your empire made one critical error. You threatened Earth. Now you're going to help us send a message to every other species in the galaxy. What happened next would be remembered as the moment humanity announced its arrival on the galactic stage. Instead of simply destroying the remaining Zephyrian ships, human forces began systematically capturing them. Advanced alien technology was stripped away and reverse-engineered in real time. Crew members were taken prisoner, not for interrogation, but for education. Captain Wright prepared to lead humanity's first interstellar expedition, his ship loaded with captured alien technology and crewed by humans who had learned to think beyond the boundaries of a single world. Set course for the Zephyrian home system, Thomas announced as exotic matter drives powered up around him. It's time the galaxy learned what happens when you threaten humanity. The final message broadcast from Earth reached every corner of the galaxy within days. It was simple, direct, and terrifying in its implications. This is Earth. We tried to stay hidden. We tried to mind our own business. You forced us to reveal ourselves. Now the galaxy has a new apex predator, and we're coming to make sure this never happens again. The age of human expansion had begun, built on the wreckage of those foolish enough to mistake kindness for weakness.